Hello, Melanie here with Christian Craft Paper, and today's tutorial is going to be on our October Crafting in Christ kit, which is, the theme is Gather Together. So I have the Deluxe Club here, and I'm going to be showing two different ways to do it. The Deluxe Club includes the full kit, which everything you'll see here, plus some additional napkins, but I am just going to kind of show you what I'll be working with here. This one, it comes with the rub-on transfers, which is 3 sheets of 6x12 transfers. I'm going to be using this transfer right here for the Transfer Club kit example. And it comes with a 10-pack of our Bible verse napkins. And I'm going to be using the Ecclesiastes 4:9, 2 are better than 1. I'm going to be using this cute little gingerbread one here for the decoupage version. Inside your kit, you'll also have your 3 bamboo wooden utensils. You're going to have your 2 fabric strips or fabric squares for our messy bow. You're going to have 2 little winter foliage, pine, berry, and pine cone little foliage pieces. You'll have your hanger that you'll need for the back, and all of your sign materials will be here in your cardboard thing. So I already have mine unboxed here. I'm going to put this to the side. And I have some of the things I have prepped just to speed it along a little bit. So again, I'll be showing 2 different versions, but let me go over some of the other things that I have grabbed. So I have got my sander, I've got brushes and water, scissors. I also am using, will be using an X-Acto knife to clean up some lines. I'll show you that when we get to that point. I've got my precision transfer tool for the transfers. I've got some painter's tape. I've got my Mod Podge. I do have Elmer's glue. I did a crackle. I'll be using a crackle technique on the rub-on transfer one, which I've already done. I do have other tutorials on that, but I'll kind of catch you up to that when we get there. As far as colors, I have got my chalk paint in a ruby. So I was just kind of looking for a red that would match the napkin design. So I have that. I will have my Waverly in just this is a bright white I'm going to be using for a base coat. And then I also have plaster that I have used on the crackle technique, so on the rub-on transfer one, and I use the sage green on the rub-on transfer one. And then I also have my Dixie Belle Bestang wax in brown. I'm using that for a couple different things. I've got my iron I'm going to go ahead and turn on. I have got some jute and some raffia for my messy bow. I've got a little bit of glitter here to show you a technique for one of the trees. And I have got my hot glue gun I'll turn on later. I also have grabbed a sheet of cardboard just because whenever we're working with the wax, I like to put something else down on the mat. The wax will come off the mat. However, I tend to get my wax all over everything. So also another, just a good reminder, have a rag or something. We'll be using that for the wax and some other things. So I am going to get started taking apart my sign. This is our topper. Oh, the other thing you're going to need is your E6000, which is like a multi-purpose glue that is going to work really well to stick everything together. If we use the hot glue, it might pop off. It's not going to dry as flat. So we really want something like the E6000. So I have that, and I usually use a popsicle stick to apply it. So we'll put that there. I'm going to start just by removing my topper. We don't need that, but you could keep it aside if you want to use it for something else or testing paints or any of those type of things. And we're going to go ahead and get started with painting the base of our sign. So we're going to put all our little words just kind of out of the way here a little bit. And I have been doing some sanding and stuff, prepping everything. So I'm just going to make sure I don't have any sanding or anything on my space that is going to mess up my paint or my transfer or any of those things. So we will start with prepping our surface for the background of our sign. This one just has a little bit of fuzzy stuff there, so I'm going to use the back side of it, and we'll just give it, we want one nice coat of the white paint, and this is going to help so that our design can blend in and also help the colors to pop. So we'll just cover this with one coat of the white paint. If you can still see the wood through it, you can add a second coat. This is one of the reasons I enjoy working with chalk paint, because it generally does a pretty decent coat with just the one coat. All right, we've got a pretty good coat on there. Do pay attention to the edges. With our border, it is going to cover some of the edges, but we just want to make sure that we get the main part we're going to have our design on needs to have a really good coat. We'll go ahead and hit this with a heat gun. All right, and then we're going to put this base aside. We're going to let it dry some more. And we're going to go ahead and paint our letters and our topper. Now for this example, I am not going to be using the trees at this point because I'm doing the gingerbread one, but we will use the trees for the other one, which is that I'm using the rub-on transfer for. So let's start with this one. I'm going to get my extra sheet here because now I'm mixing red and white and I don't want to get my red on my white. And so I'm just going to use this board as a background to catch some of the paint. We're going to do our letters and we're going to do our topper. And I'm just coming in with this ruby. Again, this is a Hello Hobby. It is a little bit of a darker red. I just bought a Waverly in Crimson, but it is more of a super bright candy cane red. So I went with the ruby because it's a little more of it has a little bit of a brown or a purple into it. It makes it a little bit darker. So that's the one I chose to go with. So we're just going to take a smaller brush here and we're going to use that to apply the ruby to our letters and our topper. And what I will do is I have to paint the sign anyway, so I will take some of the extra if I get too much on my brush and then come over and hit my letters. So if you get a little bit too much, just keep your sign there close and you can wipe off any extra on that. And once I get one coat on that, I'm going to come in here and work my frame again. You'll notice as I was kind of wiping my paintbrush on this, I was spreading it as I was getting rid of the paint on there because we don't want any blobs where like the paint is really thick or there's like chunks of paint. So make sure if you're using your topper to clean your brush that you are kind of dragging that paint. And with the red, we're probably going to have to go over it a couple coats. So I'm going to finish painting this edge of the topper here. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to touch up any of my letters where the paint is starting to come through. Like you can see it a little bit here. There'll be some edges on the letters where that wood is just going to absorb the paint a little bit more. And I'm going to come through and give it another coat. So we have a nice thick coat. as a quick little hack, if you have rattle can spray or spray paint, you could take these outside and spray paint them instead of hand painting them as well. That will work just as well as doing the hand painting. So if you prefer to spray paint your wood, have at it. You can definitely do that. So now that I have the one coat, I'm going to go back and touch up any spaces, areas of the topper or the letters that I need to get a little bit of extra paint. You basically want everything to be nice and even and one solid color. All right, I feel like we have a pretty good coat here on everything. I'm going to go ahead and put my red in the water. We will be using the red again, as well as the bright white. So I'm going to go ahead and put these aside, and I'm going to switch over to painting the, well, technically, I already painted the utensils. So when you get the utensils, they look just like this. So you have a couple of options. On this one, all I did was take the white and I painted the Waverly white all over all three of the utensils. And then on the other version that I did, just so you can see the difference, on these ones, I took the antique wax. This is the Besting Wax Dixie Belle in brown, and I did antique. So you can see a little bit of the difference there between if you do them in an antique versus if you do them in the leave them as they are, or if you paint them. And I also did the sign. Let me pull these out so we're not showing you all of the things yet. On the other version that I'm going to do for the rub-on transfer, I did the wax on the frame and I did the wax on the letters. So the only thing when you're working with the wax on the letters, you want to make sure that as you're doing them, and we can get some wax on the back of this because this is actually an extra cutout, you want to hold and just do the top here. You have to be careful. You don't want your antique wax applicator to catch. These are like, they can snap. So just make sure you're just holding it down and you're just doing the areas that you want. And this is a buildable wax. So you would just come through here and do each piece and get it the darkness that you would like. And then you can come in with your rag and just take the excess off. Okay. So just be careful when you're doing the wax. You don't want to snap your lettering. I mean, if you do, you can glue it when we place it. We can glue it back together and you're not even going to see it. But I just want to give you a heads up to be a little bit gentle when you're doing the letters and the wax. So this will kind of give you an idea of what it will look like with the frame in the wax and the letters in the wax. So we're going to move this over here, and I am actually going to, no, I'm not. I was going to move these over here, but I changed my mind. I'm not. I do have a scrap piece of paper. Where's my scrap piece of paper? And this is that cardboard is a really good use of the cardboard that comes in your kit to use it for situations like these where you need to kind of protect your surface and you don't want to get, the mat will protect your desk, but if we're working with, like I said, reds and wax and all the things, I'm trying to keep the colors not getting where they're not supposed to get. So I'm going to take my hands really quickly and just make sure they're nice and clean. We're going to work on the tools next. So again, I showed you the one that's wax. I'm actually going to do these in a candy cane stripe. So I'm going to show you how to do these. These two are done. So again, we just painted the whole thing white. It did take about 3 coats of the Waverly white to get a good solid white. And then I'm going to show you how I do the striping. So you're going to start with your white base. I'm going to put these away because we don't need those anymore. So I've already painted them white and it's already completely dry. You are going to want it dry. So before we start painting, what I'm going to do is you kind of got to figure out which is the front, which you're doing, because you can do the sign either way. You could do it with all of the curves of the spoon facing back, or you could do it with the curves of the spoon facing front. If you're doing everything facing front, then we want to do this side of the spatula so that we don't have one backwards and the rest forward. So just decide which way you want them to go, and that'll decide the ones that you're going to put the stripes on. So we're going to use our mat for this. And we're going to need just little strips of the painter's tape. So I'm going to start with the first one, and I'm just using the squares, the 1-inch squares on here, to figure out the angle to do the tape. And the first time I did it, I wrapped it around, and then when I got to here, the stripes were like a weird size. So I have found this is the best way to do it. So we're going to do each stripe individual. And mainly we want to make sure that the paint Mainly we want to make sure that the tape is completely flat and pressed in on the edges and especially this front here. So that'll be our first stripe, and then we're just going to keep getting little pieces of tape, and we're going to continue. I'm going to start at this, at the corner of this square, and I'm going to go up to the corner of that square. And again, we just need to make sure that we have enough that it kind of goes around the side a little bit. So I'm going to keep taping it, and then I'm going to go through and I'll make sure all of my tape is down flat on all of the edges. Now once you get to the larger part of the spoon or the spatula that you're working on, it gets a little bit harder to do with the lines. So at this point, I just kind of eyeball it and then work it from there. It's painter's tape, so you can rip it up and rip it off and then replace it somewhere else if you're not liking where it's ending up. So we'll do one more stripe, and then we'll go through and make sure that all of our edges that we're going to be painting, we want to make sure all of these are nice and flat, so we don't get any of the paint going up underneath them when we put our red over it. And I'm only going to be taking the paint to this edge, so I'm not worried about these parts here that don't go all the way around. So just go through and smooth each part, make sure that you don't have any wrinkles that paint's going to slip under. And then once we have that, we're going to come back in with our red again, and we're going to paint our candy cane stripes on here. Now with the red, it is going to take a few coats. So what I do first is I go through, take off any of the extra paint, and I'm just going to freehand this line. And don't worry about if this line isn't perfect, because we're actually going to take our sander and antique it a little bit, sand a little bit of it off. But basically, I'm making sure that I get these lines, because what I've noticed is that's where it likes to get light. And then I get the edge. And then I'll go back through and I will fill it in. And like I said, this is going to take 2 or 3 coats. So I'm going to do this first coat, and then we'll go back through. So now that we've got that first coat on there, what I really want to make sure is any of these corners where the tape meets the edge of the spoon or whatever it is you're working on, make sure that you get in those areas because it's really easy to kind of not get as much paint on this edge area, and we kind of want as crisp lines as we can. So I'm just going to go in here first and just add some extra paint to any of those spots that I didn't get as filled and clean those up first. And then I'm going to go back in and you can see that we've got, you can kind of see my paint lines in here. So that's where we're going to have to go through and do a second and possibly a third layer of red. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Also keep in mind, you could do these all one color too. You don't have to do the stripes. You don't have to do the wax. You could just do one solid color. Or like I mentioned, you can leave them exactly how they are as well. So after the second coat, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the heat gun, and then I'm going to see if there's any other spots that I need to touch up that I'm seeing some paint lines or it looks a little bit lighter. Now, when I'm looking at if I'm happy with the colors, I really want to pay attention to the top part and just the little bottom part. Technically, these pieces right here in the middle, the sign is going to be over them, so we're not going to see those as much, but we are going to see the top and the bottom. So those are the ones I'm going to want to make sure have the best, brightest colors, that I have them all the way painted and there isn't anything that distracts the eye once I put the sign on it. So I'm just going to go back through. I see a little bit here. Again, I can see along the edges where it's just not quite as thick. So I'm just going to touch up those parts. Make sure you're blending if you're adding anything just to one spot. Make sure you fade it out so that you don't have another spot where it looks like it needs to be a little bit more blended. All right, I'm gonna put that aside and we will come back to it in just a moment. I wanna show you some options for the trees. So if you wanna do trees in a different color, or if you wanna do the trees that I have as the example here, I did a couple different versions. And again, this is the one I'm gonna be using on the rub-on transfer, where I did the sage chalk paint, and then I went over it with the antique wax to darken up the green. And you'll see the difference here in a minute when I get them painted. This one, I just put the glitter on with no white glue and then or no white paint. And then I did one where I put the white paint on and then I did the glitter on top of the white paint to make it look kind of like snow. I don't know if you can see those. So I'm going to be showing you the technique that I used for that. Let me grab my little trees. So we're gonna come in with the chalk paint in the sage. And I don't need a really big brush for this. But we're just gonna come in and we're just gonna do one just quick coat of the sage on both the large and the smaller tree. So super simple here. I just want to make sure that I get all, as it dries, you might see a little bit of the wood showing through. Just come back and hit it with a little bit more. And that's all the sage that we need for that. I'm going to hit it with the heat gun again. And before, when I did this, I used a super small brush. I did struggle a little bit, so I'm just going to use my paint marker in a white this time. So I have a little bit more control where that snow goes. So we will hit these real quick. And then, so here you can see, this is the sage without the wax. And then this is the sage with the wax. And then let me show you this camera pic as well, because sometimes it is easier to see. Sometimes it's easier to see the colors on so you can see the two different here. So we're going to go ahead and hit this with the wax. I'm actually not going to add any more wax to my brush. I'm just going to use the wax that is on the brush. And we're just going to take it over the tree and just darken it up a little bit. And that's going to help us to match that transfer a little bit better. And so it'll fade in a little bit better. And then we're going to take our white marker and we're going to come through. We're going to want to make sure that we start the marker on something else. We're not just going to go in with it. And then we can come in here and we can fill in where we'd like the snow on the tree. I just have a little bit more control with the marker. I was having a hard time getting like a nice little kind of snow bump here at the bottom. And so I thought this time I would just try the marker and see. We may have to do a couple coats to get it as dark or as bright white as we would like, but that's fine. So you're just going to go in here and kind of draw wherever you would like to have the snow on it. So you can really make your tree however you'd like. And then I'm just going to come back through, and any parts where I really want to brighten that white, I'll just come in with another layer of the paint pen. So now that we have both of them painted, we can come through, the white is dried now, and we can apply some Mod Podge and some glitter if we want to add a little bit of that sparkle. So what I do is just take some of my Mod Podge here, and I'm just going to put it on something small. And I'm going to come in here with a smaller paintbrush, and I'm going to use that to apply right over the white. So you can put this on pretty thick because we want the glitter to stick to it. So I'm just going to blob on some of that Mod Podge right over anywhere where I have the white. And so on this pieces, I can just kind of follow this line. If I want some along the middle, again, we'll just follow the line. And you want to work a little bit quickly because we don't want this to dry before we get a chance to pour the glitter on it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. This glitter is just going to kind of sit right on these Mod Podge lines. So once you get that on there, you're going to take your glitter and we're just going to dump it right over where we have the glue. And I just have this iridescent kind of snow looking glitter, and I'm just going to dump it right on top of it. And you can blob it on there. We want it to stick to as much as possible. You can see I have a little bit of a mountain there. And then we're just going to tap it off. And then you can see how we've got that snow just sticking right to that Mod Podge to give it a little bit of sparkle. So with that, we're going to put this aside and let it cure a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and repurpose our glitter. That's why it doesn't matter how much you get on it. We can just take our sheet, bend it, and just drop it right back into our container. And then I just pop off some of the extra glitter. So as I move on to other parts of the project, it doesn't try and get everywhere on me. So that's how you're going to make the glitter trays. Let's go back to our candy cane stripe. We've got this nice and dry now. We can go ahead and start taking this tape off. And we're just going to want to pull it kind of with the lines. And we're not going to worry about any of this. I'm going to show you how to clean that up here in just a moment. And it looks like I actually did a pretty good job on the lines and the tape. So we don't have any bubbles or where the red really came out. If there is a spot where on one of the other ones I did, like you might have a little like bubble of red here, this is just a tiny one, you can actually take your X-Acto knife or some other sharp object and you can come through here and just lightly scrape. We're not trying to scrape off the white underneath, but we can just kind of take off some of that. So if you end up, like these are fine, these really aren't big at all, but if you end up with a bubble like that, you can take your X-Acto knife and you can come in and clean that up. So you could leave it exactly like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sander and I'm going to actually go through and I'm going to antique these edges. So what I'm doing is at an angle, I'm just kind of hitting all of the edges of just the front. I'm going to come on the top and I'm going to take some of the top off. So you can kind of see I'm going all the way down to the wooden spoon. And this is naturally where the spoon would have wore anyway as you used it. It's just going to help it look a little more rustic. And it's also going to clean up any of this that you have where you've gone over a little bit. The more aggressive you are going to the inside, the more it's going to take off. I want to make sure I get the bottom here and a little bit more on the edges. And you're just going to do as much or as little of this as you want. All right, once I get it pretty much where I want it, which I feel like this looks really good, you can kind of see it's roughed it up a little bit. It's looking a little more chippy. That's the look that I was going for. I'm going to come back in with my antique. I'm not going to add any more wax to it but I'm going to brush it at an angle because I'm not trying to get it on the white. I'm just trying to catch this edge. So if I do it at an angle like this, it's just going to catch that edge part. And I am kind of brushing it away. I'm not going up and down like that because I don't want to end up with a line in here. I'm kind of just brushing it out and away. So I'm just catching the edge. And it's okay if you get chunks like this. We're going to take our rag to it here in a minute. But I'm just trying to get that antique wax in that spot where the natural spoon is, or the natural utensil is revealed. And that's going to just darken up those areas. And again, this part right here is going to be covered by the sign. So if this really bugs you a lot, if this happens, you can come back over it with some white. That's going to be behind our sign. So I'm not as concerned with that spot. So I'm not going to stress about it. But you're just going to layer up as much as you want. And then we're going to come in with our rag and we're just going to go drag over it. And that's going to take off any of the extra and soften it just the tiniest bit. So from there, you can see now we have all three of our utensils with our stripes. So my biggest tip for this too is whichever direction you do the stripes, do the directions the same on both. Now on this one, you can see this was the very first one that I did. I've got like a little stripe here and then a big stripe. This is the second one I did, and then this is the third one I did. And again, because they're going to get different. But keep in mind, we're not going to see any of this spot right here. Our sign's going to be laid over it. So don't stress out if it's not exactly. Like the part that you really want to focus on is the top and the little bit of the bottom, because that's what's going to show. Now on this one, I actually taped it before it was exactly quite dry. And you can see when I took some of the tape off, it has like these little chip marks where the paint stuck a little bit. I actually like that. It did it on the round, this one too. So I'm not too concerned with that. It goes along with the chippy look that I am trying to achieve. So now we have our spoons done for that. So we're going to go ahead and we want to make sure that we have everything off of our hands because we're going to start working with the white again. And for this part, we're going to do the iron on decoupage. So I'm going to turn my iron on, and then we'll also need our parchment paper for this. I'm also going to take this opportunity to clean any of the dust I have on here because I'm going to be switching to the rub-on transfer here in just a moment. So we're going to get all of this cleaned off and out of the way, and then we'll just kind of get any dust or anything that we have on the surface or any glitter, because we don't want that getting in the way of our rub-on transfer that we'll be doing next. So from here, we are ready for the base of our sign. So let me get the correct base here. And this is the part where you're going to want to start kind of figuring out where you're going to be putting everything. Now, as I was grabbing these things, I forgot I am actually going to take my sander. So I am going to make a little bit of a mess here. But I'm going to take my little sander and I'm going to actually rough up some of the sign and the letters as well, so they kind of match the feel that I have with my utensils. So I don't want this to be super bright and then the utensils themselves be a little more aged. So to do that, I'm going to work on this in sections. We're going to get my sander, and I'm going to come back through here, and I'm just going to lightly kind of tear up the edges on some of these. And again, you're going to do this as much or as little as you want. We're going to have to be careful because we don't want to snap our sign when we're going through and edging it. So I'm just going to kind of hit these outside edges of the word grouping. So you can kind of see I've got both of these just a little bit more roughed up. We're going to do the last one here. All right, so we'll take a look at it and see if there's anything that looks like we need to give a little bit more. This looks pretty good. I'm trying to get any of the straight edges, just using the different sides of the sander. And then we're gonna get our brush again from our antique wax, and we're just gonna come in and hit those outside places. Again, we're not putting a whole lot. We're just trying to soften up the lightness of the wood where we sanded it away. So kind of in the same direction that you sanded it, you're going to come in and add the wax. And that's just going to give it a little bit more dimension. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with our frame. So we're going to sand it a little bit, then we're going to come in with the wax and hit it with the wax. So I'm going to do the inside of the little scallops, and then I'm going to do the outside of the frame. So for this part, you can see I'm just taking off the very tip. And then we'll do the same thing with the outside. Going to get the corners where the natural wear and tear would occur. And then same thing, we're not adding any more wax, but we're just going to come in and hit the edge and just catch the inside of those little scallops. And now we've got our frame and our words looking a little bit more antique, not so fresh and white. And that's kind of what we're going to go with to match the feel of our napkin a little bit. So I'm going to take my gun here and just move everything out of the way. Let's wipe our hands off one more time because we're going to be moving to the white, and we don't want to get any of that wax on top of the white. So we'll go ahead and switch out here. Now I'm going to be putting the napkin. In fact, let's go ahead and cut that part out first. So you could cut around it. I'm actually going to be using the decoupage edge technique so that it blends in with the design a little bit more. So I'm only going to be using the two little gingerbread people. So I'm actually just going to cut through this just so I'm not working with as big of a piece. So I'm just going to rough cut it, and then I can use these verses for something else. You could add them onto your project. You can layer designs over each other for when you Mod Podge. So generally I will keep anything that I don't use, and I have a little scrap bucket that I will put it in. So I'm going to rough cut it first, and then I'm going to decoupage edge it. I should have got my bigger scissors, but I have these smaller one out for the bow. Now, if you haven't used our napkins before, we do only have the napkins printed on the front side because we print them here in the United States, and that's the option that we have is to only print the front. So that's why we only have the one print, because we do all of our own custom designs. So I'm going to take my water pin here, and I'm just going to go around the outside of the design that I want to use. So I'm just going to be using our little gingerbread people here. So I'm just going to go ahead and get it wet. You can use a paintbrush if you don't have a water pen. I actually got these on Amazon. The ladies have told me that they do have them at some Dollar Trees. I checked a bunch of times and was not able to find them, nor does my Hobby Lobby carry them. So I ended up just breaking down, I think it was like a 4 or 5 pack on Amazon. Very inexpensive, so I just grabbed those. So I do only work a section at a time because with the fan and everything, the water does like to dry out before you get to actually tearing it what you want. And just use your nails to kind of pinch so it only tears the part that you want. And again, you don't have to get this detailed with your design. I'm just trying to trim it up a little bit here so that I just have the little people on here. You can tell with the water pen, it did want to push out a bunch of water there. So you just kind of have to use a soft hand. And if it goes too far in, just tear it a little bit more to the outside. And I'm just kind of going in a flowy pattern around the designs. And then I'm gonna have a couple of these edges where this is pretty straight and this is pretty straight. So I'm just gonna come through here and just use my nails and just pinch off. If your nails aren't working, you can just get it a little bit wet and then just pinch gently just that outer edge, just so it gives it a little of the torn effect. And that's gonna help blend out those spots right there. So we're just gonna have the very tip-toppy of her bow that looks like it is a little straight, but that's okay. Now we only need the top layer of, we got some glitter on here. We only need the top layer of the napkin. But before we go any further, I kind of want to get an idea of where this is going to be, because we don't need to cover the whole sign with the Mod Podge. I kind of want to get an idea of where I need to cover with the Mod Podge. So we've got our little gingerbread men, and then I've got to kind of see where the letters are going to go. So I'm just kind of getting an idea of how I'm going to want to lay this out. And do I need to scooch them over, which I do. So they may end up a little bit under the frame here. So kind of get an idea of where everything's gonna end up. So we can just, now you can cover the whole thing with Mod Podge, but we don't necessarily need to. Alrighty. Now you can take a little, my pencil always tries to escape from me. You can take a little pencil and kind of mark off some of the areas that you're going to want to keep the Mod Podge to. Again, this is not like a perfect, it doesn't need to be perfect, and I'm probably going to have to go in here and add a little bit more, but I'm just trying to give myself an idea of where all it needs to be, so I can kind of stay in that space there. So we're going to move our letters out of the way. We're going to come in here with our Mod Podge, and I'm just going to lay it right on here. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to fill in that area. And I do know I need to go a little bit outside of that area. Now over here is going to be inside under the frame. So once we get it on here, we can actually put it back on there once it dries and see if there's any other places that if we need to take it a little bit further. Since we're doing the iron-on decoupage method, we're actually going to wait for this to dry before we put it on. So that's going to allow us to place it again, take a look at it, see if we need to cover any additional space, and then add a little bit more if we need to. So you just need a thin coat in the area that you're going to put the design. You will be able to see the difference in sheen once this dries. So let's hit it with the heat gun and see where we're at as far as placement. All right, so that's pretty dry. I can come back in here and I can make sure that, so I can see I need to go a little bit further down on her feet. So this is where we can take our Mod Podge, put it on something else, grab a little bit of it, and we can kind of see where we need to go down. Now I am making sure that it doesn't stick to those spots. And I'm just bringing it around the outside more. And we still have both of our plies on there. So even if it wants to stick to it a little bit, we still have our plies on there. All right, that's covered a little bit better. So we're gonna let that dry, and then we'll be ready for the iron on. Now from here I can go ahead and start separating the plies of my napkin. These are 3-ply napkins and we only need the top ply. So I'm going to go ahead and find one of the areas where I can see that it's starting to separate, and I'll go ahead and start separating the plies from there. You can tell when you have the top ply because the ink will be, you'll see the ink pattern on the layer underneath it. And then we just want to make sure that as we're going here, I don't want to lose any of the legs or anything because of the way that I decoupage edged it. So just work very slowly. Everywhere where there's ink, there is color saturation, so it is going to want to stick a little bit. So just gently work around. If you get stuck at a certain part, come around from another angle and you can start separating it for that ink from that angle. It is easier to decoupage edge it when you have the multiple layers. It just gives you a little more grace when you are tearing. So that's why we don't separate it until we're ready to go ahead and put it on here. So we can see we have some ink on this one, so we know that we've got all of the layers. And from here, we're going to go ahead and put her down. And we just want to make sure that all of the areas are covered. And I definitely want to make sure that I cover any areas where I drew that little pencil line. So from this part too, we can bring our frame back over and we can make sure that we have them straight. So I can see I need to push him over a little bit because I can see a pencil mark there. So I need to go over and up. All right, there we go. Now everything is covered. And I'm just going to lay my topper on here again. I've got the wind blowing it a little bit. And then I just want to make sure, again, before I put it down, that I've got enough room for my letters. Because once we iron it down, she gonna be stuck. All right, it looks like I have room for everything. So notice I'm keeping the napkin held down because I do have it where I would like it. Now we're going to come in with our parchment paper over it because we do not want the design to stick to our iron. So we'll bring in parchment paper. Again, we've kept it held here so it's exactly where we want it. We're going to layer our parchment over. Move our frame out of the way. Making sure we don't have any wrinkles underneath there where it's lifted up, and it did lift up, so good thing I checked. We should be able to see the whole design, and we should not be able to see any pencil marks, and we do not. So we're good to go ahead and hit it with the iron. And we're just going to press it on. And that's how you get no wrinkles. So you can see we've got it ironed on there really well. With that, we can go ahead and put the parchment paper away. Turn our iron off. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on my glue gun. Now, in the event that you have some of the Mod Podge showing, or right here, I can see I have a little bit of the pencil marks showing, so I did not cover that side even though we checked it. We can come back in here with our white paint and we can touch up any of these parts. And so we just want to make sure that we are feathering out, because there is just a little bit of sheen from the Mod Podge. So if that is bugging you and you're not liking it, we're just going to take the tiniest bit of paint and come back in here, and we're just going to cover that up. And again, make sure we're just feathering it out, cover the spot that you want, and then feather it out. And that's going to help get rid of some of that sheen along the edge if it's bugging you. I'm a little OCD about that kind of stuff, so I'm just going to hit it. Again, drag your excess paint out because we want to fade into the paint that we already have. And I'm just going to go around the edges a little bit more, and then we will be good to move on to the next step. So cute. Okay, we've got our little gingerbread men on there. Now I would go at this point and I would seal it. I use an acrylic spray sealer. I will show you. This is the one that I use. This is the Eileen's in matte finish. It's good for indoors and outdoors. I would do a light coat, spray it outside, do a light coat, wait about 30 minutes, do another light coat, and then probably wait about an hour before I proceed. For the sake of the tutorial, we are going to move on ahead. And at this point, we're ready to go ahead and start putting our topper and our letters on. So for this, we're going to go ahead and get our E6000 glue, and we're going to start assembling the actual frame. So with this, I like to use a popsicle stick to get the glue out of it, because it is kind of like a giant toothpaste type of tube. And I did find out on my last one, if you have the top of it is not like a clear liquid, it's more of like a almost like a dried like hot glue, then that's not what you want. You want to go ahead and scrape that off, and what we want is the nice clear glue. So we're going to do this upside down first, and I'm actually going to do both frames. So if you are a rub-on transfer, hold on tight. I'm going to get this topper on and the letters on, and then I'm going to switch over and I will do the rub-on transfer. I'm going to show you how to apply the rub-on transfer to your sign. So you're just going to want to get a nice little glob on each of the four corners here. And again, we're using the E6000 because this is going to allow us to move it around a little bit without, unlike the hot glue that once we stick it, it is going to stick. You can also use in conjunction with, so you could use, I lost my lid, you can use the E6000 to move it around and then the hot glue at the same time so that it will dry, it will adhese it while it dries. If we do that, we just have to work very quickly, because I did that on the tutorial earlier this week, and the hot glue actually was keeping it from sticking. So we're going to line it up, and then we're going to hold it up straight so we know that it's on exactly, and then we're going to press it down really well. I'm going to add the letters here in a minute. I'm going to let that go ahead and sit, and I'm going to switch over to the rub-on transfer one that I have working on over here. Now the rub-on transfer, I did the crackle technique. Lost a spoon. I did the crackle technique on that one. So the crackle technique I've done on a few tutorials. Basically what you're going to want to do is you do the color that you want to show through the crackle. You're going to paint that color first. In this example, I used a black. And then once that dries, you're going to go over it with a thin layer of the Elmer's, just straight Elmer's glue. You want it I say thin, but you want it a little bit almost like a glaze, even over it. Then you're going to set your timer. You're going to wait 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you're going to go over it with the color that you want to be the top color. So in this example, I used the plaster over the top. You're going to add it and then you're going to drag it, but you're not going to overwork it. Just get it covered and then you're going to let it dry. I hit it with the glue gun and then I hit it with the heat gun and then I actually had it sitting outside probably for a good 45 minutes, because here's the thing with the transfers. They will not stick if your surface is not completely cured, okay? So especially with when you're doing multiple layers, it has to be 100% dry or the transfer is not going to come off of it. So for this example, for this sign, I am going to be using, I have the crackle and then I just did the antique wax over the frame. And I want to use this transfer right here. So there's 3 sheets in here. There's multiple ones that you could use. If you don't want to use the wooden letters, there's all these different ones. You could use this one and put it on the bottom, this one, or you could use the candle and put this one on the bottom. So you can mix, match, and layer these all you want. You could use this one right in the middle. There's so many different ones in this set that you could use. You could also use the candy cane stripe letters if you wanted. So on this one, we could actually take and use the candy stripe letters on here if we wanted to tie that in. So with the Deluxe Club, you get pretty much all of the options. Let me put that aside, and we're going to go ahead and cut out the design that we're going to use for this one. We're just going to go ahead and rough cut it out because the design is only where you see the color. So we can just rough cut around what the part that we want to use. We're going to leave the white on it on the backing for now so we can kind of get an idea for placement of how we want everything, just like we did the first one. So I'm going to grab my letters from this one. So I have my gather and I have my together because I need to make sure that wherever I place this, I've got it far enough over that everything fits. And then also with this one is where I wanted to bring in the trees that I did. So I'm just trying to get an idea of which of these is going to fit. I also have the option of I could put the tree here, which I might actually like that to just give it a more dimension and more layering. And I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. All right, so the letters work there, but I do want to make sure that I get this centered. So at this point, I'm going to use my mat so that I know that, let me just make sure that's where I want it. I want it a little bit higher. I probably want to center it is what I want to do. All right, so we're going to scooch it over so that we can see where the center of this design is. So if I pretty much kind of try and line this up with this line here, I should be in good shape. So I'm going to push those letters up a little higher. And I'm going to bring this down. And we're going to need our precision transfer tool for this. If you don't have the precision transfer tool, you can use the little card that comes with it. That works as well. I just like the precision transfer tool because I can get in all the little nooks and crannies. All right, we're going to peel off the back so we can see the whole design here. We don't want to touch any of that design, but I do know I need to make sure my house is center and kind of center the snow globe line as close as I can to this line. So we're going to push it down with our hands, and then we're going to go through with our precision transfer tool and we're going to rub it into the painted wood. Now, because I did a crackle, I've got to get in all of those little crackles. So I've really got to kind of push it down, which is again why I Do recommend the precision transfer tool. You want to work from the center and work out so we're not getting any bubbles in our design. And we're just going to go over it really well. And then we will pick a corner here to catch, and then we'll start peeling it off. So we're going to rub and peel at the same time. It should automatically release when it's ready. So if you've got some of the edges or something that aren't coming off automatically, like with a gentle release, then we need to go back over it and make sure that everything is stuck where it's supposed to be and is down all the way. And again, if your paint is nice and dry, you shouldn't have any issue with this. If your paint is wet, that's when it's going to give you trouble. Okay, so now we can go back to where we were with the other one. We're going to go ahead and put our toppers back on here. So back to applying our E6000. And I'm just going to squish it out here and get some blobs that I can put on here. Just right in the corners. Leave that there. We'll flip it around. And we're going to go ahead and put it on here and line it up and press it down. Make sure that we have it on straight. And you can see I've got a big old blob of paint here. What I'm going to do with that is once it's dry and sealed, I can come in with the sander and I can hit that. But for right now, I'm not going to mess with it because it's going to mess with my seal here. All right, so we have that. We're going to go ahead and switch back to our other one. We're going to let this one sit here. Now, in the event you have a little bit, you can see I've got a little bit of bowing right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my hot glue gun, and I'm going to stick a little bit of glue in there. And I'm going to go ahead and push that down. That's going to help the bow, but these corners are what is going to make it stick permanently. So if you have a situation like that, that's all you're going to do. Put a little bit of hot glue in there, push it down. That will hold that enough to stop the bow, and then your E6000 is what's going to keep it completely flat. So from here, we're ready to go ahead and put on the letters. The letters, the E6000 is a little bit thick, so I'm actually going to switch to a thinner one. And we did give these in kits a while ago. This is just a thinner consistency. And so I'm going to use that to apply these because I can get a little bit more control with the tip of this one, because you'll see it's way finer. So we'll take these one at a time. I've got my other letters here. And I'm going to do the gather part first. So again, I'm just going to apply the glue. I'm basically looking in the corners of it throughout the lettering. So I'm going to get these joints here. I'm going to get the outside. You can see we're just putting little dots anywhere where there's like a little bigger of a space. I'm going to stick my needle in there just so we don't get that drying out on us. And then if you have any of these little glue lines, we can come here with our precision transfer tool or your scissors or a pencil and just get rid of any of these before we stick it on. You can see from the front. You can see from the front if you hold it up to the light if you have any additional of those. So we're going to bring this back down, line it up with our mat, And then we're going to try and get it as centered as we can to drop it down and just press it in. Then we're going to do the same thing with our together. Now to the together, I'm actually going to push the end of the R into one of these little notches to kind of help me straighten it. And then I'll do the last part, and then I'll do the T. So we're just going to repeat that same process with our glue. I'm going to anchor it in that corner. And then press it down. And now we just need to add our T. So there we go. We've got our letters on our sign. We've got our toppers on our sign. Have one little something in there. And now we can move to putting our letters on our other one. So this one, again, has the teeniest bit of bowing in here. So I'm going to go ahead and tack the bottom down. And we're ready to go ahead and put our letters. Now you notice on this example here, these letters are actually a little bit thinner than the ones that I used on this one. This was the original prototype, and we actually decided to make the letters a little bit thicker. So your letters will not be this thin. But from here, we can kind of figure out where we want. I feel like it's easy to anchor it in that corner, so I am going to do the same thing and just anchor it over in the corner. So I can kind of get an eyeball that I need the T to kind of line up with this. So, and the other thing you could do is you could leave the bottom letters there and just work on one section at a time till you get them in. But we're going to go ahead, put our glue on these and get these attached. All right, I know I'm going to anchor it in there, so we can go ahead and put the glue on that one. Now, because we use the E6000, if you're not liking the angle a little bit, you should have a little bit of wiggle room to move that. But I think that looks good just like that. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do my Christmas tree down here. So I will apply that next. For this one, because all that's going to be attached is this outside edge and the tree or the trunk, I'm going to focus on getting the glue on the tips. It looks like the 4 tips and the trunk. I just want to make sure I don't have any strings coming that are going to be showing from the outside. So I'm just going to pull those in. And then I'm going to just work on anchoring the parts that are stuck. So here we have our first sign, or our rub-on transfer sign. And then we have our decoupage one. And now we're ready to make our bow and apply put the spoons on the back, and then we can put the hanger and we'll be good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the messy bow for it. And so I am going to grab my mini Bodabra, and then I've got to find where I put the fabric for this second set here. I had everything here. I know it's a black and red checker. Oh, it's buried under here. Here we go. All right, to make our bow, we're going to need our string. And if you don't have a Bodabra, you can still make these just by piling the strips in an X on your surface. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to cut the actual fabric squares. And these are going to be pretty much like a thumb's width because this is a little bit of a bigger project. So I'm going to cut about a thumb's width, and then I'm just going to tear it. And we should end up with 4 strips. And this is a little bit bigger piece, so that's fine. I'm just going to cut it right in half, and this will be our bigger base. So we've got those. We're going to do the same thing to our other fabric scrap, and you can kind of tell which way to cut it. If the strings are coming off long way, that's the way that you need to cut it. So we'll cut this into 4 strips as well. And it's messy, so they don't need to be perfect. All right, we're not going to worry about any of the tails or anything right now. We're going to go ahead and take whatever color you want on the bottom, and we're going to jam it in here. Just make sure it's kind of even. If you don't have the bow maker, then you're just making an X on your surface over your string. So we're going to do 2 of the first color, and then actually 4 of the first color, 2 at a time. And then to give it a little bit of texture, we're going to add in some raffia. So I am just going to grab a couple, actually this one might be good. I'm going to grab a couple of strings of raffia, and we're going to find wherever the end is here. Be careful because this stuff will give you slivers if you are not careful. And then I just use my fingers to separate them as far apart as they need to be. And I'm going to wrap them around in here together. I'm going to try and catch the ends in the middle. This one didn't catch, that one didn't catch. It's fine, but the main ones did, because we can trim these other ones. And then we're just going to jam it right here in the middle of our bow. And from here, if we want to try and catch these little stragglers, we can. You can bring these in. And then we're going to come in with our color that we want on the top. So we're just going to keep going over these. Again, don't worry about the little pieces of string that are hanging off. We'll deal with those once we get it done. And we're just going to layer them in there. You can use this to push it down if you need to. Sometimes I do, sometimes I forget. And we're going to tie a knot, pull it out, and then we're going to squish it a little bit because it's going to want to be like this, and we want it like this. Squish it and then flip it over because we want this to be the front, and we're going to tie the knot, double knot it on the back. Once you get that, you can go ahead and clip the ends if you don't want them to show, or if you want to use the ends as part of your bow, you can leave them. And we can cut any of these that are super long. So I do like scrappy, but I don't want like one weird, really long one. And so see, I've got this right here. Just cut that off. And then you can smush this around. And we'll do it more before we put it on there, but you can separate those so that they go out more in the direction that you want. But we'll put that aside for now. The next part we need to do is start assembling the rest of the pieces of the sign. So we're going to take our 3 spoons here, and you're probably going to want some kind of measuring device. I'm actually just going to use my mat here. because I want to make sure that they are all center. Now I am noticing this one in the middle is a little bit thicker. So I think I'm actually going to do this the other way because we're going to need to lay them down this way because this one is a little bit thicker. So before we do that, let's look at what it looks like from the front so we know which way we're going to do it. All right, I'm going to have the thick one in the middle. And I'm going to separate these about 2 inches each. And I can just line them up with my mat here. And then I'm going to figure out where I want them, or do I want them a little bit closer? So now I've got the one centered, and then I'm coming over like 1/4 inch on each. And I feel like we can even make them touch if you want. So we just kind of have to figure out. I actually kind of like the 2-inch spacing. All right, so 2-inch spacing and about 1/2 inch above the hole kind of falls right at the 1 inch. So I'm going to go about 1/2 inch above that when I glue it all together. So we're going to flip it over and do this on the back side because this one is thicker. So it's going to kind of push forward. So we'll flip it over. Make sure that the top of your design is at the top. That would be something I would not be paying attention to and mess up. Make sure that your candy cane is facing down. And we can have all of this measured on our mat here. So we know that hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4. This line right here at the 10 is the center. So I'm going to want to line up the top and the bottom with my mat. And then based on how I wanted it, I want the sign. I got to bring the sign down. I want the sign about 1/2 inch above the hole. And you're kind of going to get an idea of what it's going to look like from the back still. But we'll go ahead and line up these other ones. So if I want them 2 inches, the hole is going to be actually on the middle. It'll be right on the middle of the line. And what we can do is we can use, I know it's hard for you to see right here, the top of the cutout spoon is going to line up with our line. So that's going to help us keep it straight. And we're going to attach these one at a time. Again, coming in with our E6000. So if we put it on here this way, we'll know we can put the glue anywhere in between here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get out our popsicle stick again, or if you're like me and threw yours away or lost it, we're going to grab another popsicle stick. And we're going to stick our glue on here. So I'm going to probably put 3 generous dots right here because I really want this to stick. So I'm going to do a pretty good smear here, pretty good smear here, and a pretty good smear here. And then you can see I've got a little bit of dried. I'm going to take that out. We're just going to do these one at a time. So flipping back over, I know I need to have the bottom, and I'm going to center it, the spoon, with the line I have going up at the top, and I'm centering the hole with the line I have at the bottom, and I'm going to give that a really good push. I'm going to go ahead and do the outside one next. So same thing, we're going to flip it over, line it up, so I know where I can put the glue and add my glue chunks. Double checking, we're the same distance here. We've got them straight. We have our sign straight. Oh, see, I didn't have the sign straight, so now I got to straighten that back out. And then we'll come in with our last one here. Now this one is thicker, so it's going to pop out from the board more than the other two. But so far what we have is this. So I am going to check the front. Now they're not all the way cured, so I need to be careful moving this around because even with the weight of the signs, they can shift. But I'm going to just be looking to see, do they look straight? And that everything looks good with that one. So I am going to put this one aside. We're going to do the same thing that we just did to the rub-on transfer one. Once we have it on, we're going to flip it over, make sure that we like how everything is looking on the front. Do we need to change anything? Everything there looks good. So we're going to flip it back over, and the next thing that we need to do is add the hanger that we're going to hang it from on the back. So that is this little hook right here. We are going to add it right here because this is where going to be the majority of the weight. We're going to use the E6000 and we're going to use the hot glue. So we'll use both to attach it. And then we can come in with our stick and we can just scrape off any of the extra E6000. And I'm just using an extra precision transfer tool to get any of the extra, to clean up the E6000 across the back. All right, now we're ready to put our embellishments and put our bow all on it together. And we'll wrap it up. So for this one, we have this space right here to be able to put our bow and our little pine that comes with it. So we're gonna go ahead and stick everything on here like so. We probably wanna go just a little bit higher, and I'm gonna go ahead and clip these just a little bit. I don't want any of the tails like hanging off. So I'm just gonna get my wire cutters and just clip the very bottom of the pig so that I don't have that piece hanging off. So we're going to keep the fat part because that's where it's going to give us the biggest surface to glue. And I'm going to angle them like so. And I'm going to put one so that the berries are going to the bottom and one that the berries are going to the top. And then we're going to go ahead and put our thing right over it. Now, if we want this to come out a little bit further, we can push these out a little bit more, and that will give us room for our bow. So that is probably what I'm going to do so that I don't have my bow going too far over my design. And we can also bring it up a little bit. don't want to bring it up too far. So I'm going to shoot for, and these are bendable, so if it's not going where you want to go, just kind of shove that berry wherever you want it. And we'll go ahead and attach these next. And then we can go ahead and attach our bow. And I'm going to put the glue right on the bow and line it up right with the center where those meet. And then I have a few little leftover pine cones from last month's kit. So I'm just going to place them right in the middle here to kind of finish off the bow a little bit, to give it a little more texture. And then you can trim off if you have any little strings or anything that are sticking out and you don't want them poking out that way. You can go ahead and leave them or trim them up a little bit so that it looks kind of how you want it to look like. So we are going to want to let this sit overnight without touching it too much. Again, we don't want to bump any of our spoons or anything. They still need to move and set. So you've got the front, you've got it all done on the back, and it's ready to hang. I'm going to go ahead and finish the second one and take some pictures, and that's it. I want to thank you for crafting along with me today. If you finish your project and would love to share it and you share it on social media, you can tag at christiancraftpaper.com and we'll be able to see that you posted that and we can share it with our community. Also welcome the members to share it in your group because we always get inspired what each of you do with your kits because they all look so different. So again, thank you so much for crafting with me, and until next time, happy crafting!